Welcome to this week's Daytime Dialogues. It's my great pleasure to welcome a dear friend and one of the leaders of Orthodox Judaism worldwide, Rabbi Daniel Korobkin. Rabbi Korobkin received his smicha from Rav Ruderman at Ner Yisrael. He is the rabbi of the Bayit in Thornhill, which we know as Toronto, and which is also one of the largest shuls, Orthodox synagogues in North America. Having come from San Diego, Los Angeles, Allentown beforehand, Rabbi Korobkin has 2 master's degrees and is also the translator and annotator of probably the best English version of the Kuzari that is out there and is available from Feldheim. In fact, my first interaction with Rabbi Korobkin was when I was writing book reviews for the Jewish book world, and he published the Kuzari, and they sent me the copy of the Kuzari. Would I write the review on it? I didn't know him yet, but I got to know him through his work, and I've become an admirer, and fortunately in recent years, a close friend with Rabbi Korobkin, so it's my pleasure to welcome him to KINS and to our Daytime Dialogues. Thank you, Rabbi Korobkin, for joining us this week.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Rabbi Matanki. Yeah, you were so generous with that review. That was back in 1998, if you remember that. That's a long time ago.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for that portion of the royalties I was promised, but apparently the check's in the mail.
Well, we changed publishers since then, so you'll have to track down the old publisher.
Yeah, they kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
So let me just start out with a simple thing. Everyone is noticing behind me is Congregation KINS. Behind you is an Action comic book cover that is right next to your grandfather.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's my grandfather.
Yes.
That is Superman. These are my parents. Yeah.
Oh, those are your parents. So how did Superman make it up there?
Okay, so I'm gonna tell you a secret that you probably already know. Every rabbi is secretly a superhero, and we have a secret identity, and we all wear glasses to cover and wear shirts with ties to cover our costume underneath. At least sometimes that's the way it feels. And so many of us go into various professions because we want to help other people. And when you want to try and help other people and save the world and save humanity, that's what a superhero is all about. I grew up very much enthralled with the comic book industry, and I'm a big collector, and I have old comics and stuff like that. And I actually saw this reproduction of Action Comics number 50. I think it's from 1939 or 1940. And what fascinated me about it is that there's a pasuk in Mishlei that says, "Ba'atzaltayim yimach hamekareh uvishiflut yadayim yidlof habayit," that through laziness, the roof will cave in. It's basically King Solomon is saying, look, you got to tend to your house, because otherwise, if things crash in, you're not going to be able to save the situation. Here's Superman in a coal mine, where the crossbeam of the coal mine has crashed in. All of the coal miners are cowering in fear, and he comes in and he holds up the beams. And sometimes I think that's the job of a rabbi, is just to hold up the beams when things are starting to collapse. It's especially pertinent, for our times.
And it's interesting, you are, by the way, not just the superhero, you are the president of the Rabbinical Council of America, the very first Canadian-based president. In fact, beforehand, you and I shared an interesting commonality. I had been vice president of the Midwest region, and you were vice president of the Midwest region. It just, the RCA includes Canada and the Midwest. And so
That's right.
Became
it's not based on geography, it's based on culture. Midwesterners are nice, they're friendly, they're not edgy. So just like it's true in Chicago, it's true in Toronto as well.
Well, thank you for that Chicago and Toronto piece. And anyone watching from New York, you can figure out what we think there. But the reality is you're now a president of the RCA at a very interesting time. The politics in America are fascinating. The politics in Israel are fascinating. The changing dynamics within the Orthodox community worldwide continues to really move so rapidly. In your role today, what do you think are the major challenges that we're facing in our community?
It's such a broad question, and we can go into so many different directions. But I would say this, a few things. First of all, being part of the RCA during a pandemic has been especially not only challenging, but also rewarding, because the role of these national organizations that serve the Orthodox community and its leadership has been especially helpful to our communities, and really very, very vital in trying to provide a sense of calm, providing information resources, and providing different communities a sense of uniform behaviors and standards, and just trying to provide Piskei Halacha from our Rosh Yeshiva at Yeshiva University. So that, as far as being part of the RCA in the midst of a pandemic, has been really both challenging and very rewarding. And you and I, because you're so much a vital part of, you should all know, if your Rabbi Matanki is your rabbi, or if he's your principal at Ida Crown, you should know that we don't know. We think that Rabbi Matanki has cloned himself a few times over, because we're not really sure how he's able to devote the time that he does to the RCA while at the same time having two very busy jobs locally. But Rabbi Matanki, you've been involved in so many of the very difficult decisions that we've had to make in trying to deliver information to all of our Rabbanim and their respective congregations. So you've seen the type of work that the RCA has done, sometimes in a standalone capacity and sometimes in conjunction with both the OU and Yeshiva University. So that's, I guess that's the first thing that I would say, is that during a pandemic, the role of a national organization like ours, especially for the Rabbanim, is very, very important. The other thing that we're seeing is a slow, sad, but slow fraying of the edges of North American society. I say North American because Canada is included, but it's really more south of the border of where I am. I'm an American, as many of you know, but I got out just in time, I guess is what people tell me. American society is fraying very, very severely at the edges, and is really in danger of complete disintegration. The levels of anarchy and social unrest is quite alarming. There are many people who have exploited the pandemic to only heighten that level of anarchy and social unrest. But we are seeing America tearing itself apart at the seams. And we as spiritual leaders have traditionally been the voices of reason, of trying to create peace and reconciliation within our society. And we have to continue being that way. And that raises a very important question as to what is the role of the rabbi, especially vis-a-vis politics. I don't know if you saw that recent article from Rabbi Sachs commenting from the UK about how rabbinic leadership is making a big, big, big mistake. Did you read that article?
I saw it. I found it fascinating, since his successor, Rabbi Mervis, actually had stepped into the fray at the elections in England as well. But
right. And I think that in that situation he had to, because of Corbyn, because that was direct and very overt anti-Semitism. So I don't know if Rabbi Sachs would have taken umbrage at that, but the idea of rabbis writing op-ed pieces that really have nothing to do with our role as rabbis, but are more having to do with being a political pundit, I happen to agree with him. And there's always that philosophical dialectic as to whether a rabbi should discuss politics from the pulpit. But I think it takes it to a whole new level when a rabbi's greatest audience are those, whether it's to the right or to the left, and a rabbi becomes a political pundit. I think it's a tragic mistake, not only because it's not the purview of a spiritual leader to get involved in those areas, but furthermore, because the role of the rabbi, the minister, the priest, whatever it is, the imam, is to try to bring reconciliation. You and I both know that we have in the pews people sitting next to each other who, if they were to engage in a political discussion, might start pulling out weapons or strangling each other, right? And the reason why they don't is because we come to a beit tefillah, we come to a house of prayer to be able to connect with each other and with the Ribono Shalom. And so for a rabbi to start creating those wedges within his own congregants by taking one position over another is really the antithesis, in my opinion, of what our roles are supposed to be.
So in these times, which we're facing, and we're facing, some really complicated times, the pandemic you mentioned, and also the politics. As a rabbi, when you're speaking from the pulpit, do you find yourself talking more as a teacher of Torah or as a guide to how to maneuver these complications? And are your drushes more limud Torah, are they more teaching, or are the drushes more musar, giving them direction in a way?
Well, I mean, there's a number of ways of delivering Torah information to our students or to our congregants. There's a shir, and then there's a drasha. A shir is more informational about Torah knowledge, and I think that a sermon or a drasha is really meant to be more of a motivational, inspirational message, especially during a time when so many people are suffering from depression. And so I do certainly try to contemporize the message so that people can relate a Torah idea to their lives. I mean, this past Shabbos, I spoke about an article from Psychology Today about how people self-sabotage, how people sabotage their own careers, their own lives, their own relationships. And we have to be careful not to do that. And of course, you always tie it into the Parsha, but the motivational aspects of, we are all together and we are all going through difficult times and we will emerge from this. Rabbi has to always remain optimistic and be the voice of calm and the voice of reason.
So we're both rabbis. We both have we're walking into the busiest season of the year, but we're also walking out of a season which didn't have a break.
Yeah.
And just to be upfront with everyone who's watching and listening, Rabbi Korobkin also is one of my heroes during the pandemic, because early in the pandemic, his son got married in Los Angeles when we were all under stay-at-home orders, and Rabbi Korobkin and his wife stayed at home while his son got married in LA, which I had mentioned to people when they complained about the restrictions. And
I think you've had a few grandchildren since the pandemic.
Yeah, but you know what? They get born without grandparents around often.
Yeah,
people don't get married too often without their parents there.
Right.
And you had another simcha recently as well, which you were able to be at. But none of us have had any break. It's been going full force. You've been leading this massive congregation in Toronto. Anyone who's ever seen the Bayit, davened at the Bayit, been at the Bayit, knows that it is an organization, a synagogue on many different levels. It's a synagogue within a synagogue within a synagogue. There's so many things happening. How have you been able to manage personally some time, some relaxation, some opportunity? We tell everybody, we tell all of our balabatim, you got to take it calm. You have to find some time. You have to find some space. Don't overwork yourself, especially in this. And then we break those rules ourselves.
Yeah, unfortunately we do, because again, it's got to do with this guy over here, the Superman guy. We think that we're invulnerable. We think that we have to keep pushing ourselves, even when the kryptonite is out there and it may end up killing us. But if we can save the cat in the tree, we're going to do that. I mean, look, that's the role that we've chosen for ourselves, and part of the rabbinic persona, I suppose, is that, and perhaps some of it is hubris. I don't know. But we feel that, a lot of people are relying on us. We very much do not want to disappoint our congregation, our members, our friends. And so we persevere, we push on. But at the same time, you're right, we're human beings. We burn out, we get exhausted, both mentally and physically. And so what I try to do is at least take one day, or at least a portion of a day, where I can just space out and listen to some relaxing music and read a book or watch a Netflix program or something like that. I do try to exercise every day on the elliptical, and I use that time to also space out a little bit. So there's every person has to figure out what, and this is not just unique to the rabbinate. So many of our members are under the same kinds of stresses that we are. It's just a different profession. Look at the I mean, it's a joke when we compare ourselves to what the frontline medical workers are going through. They've also been working tirelessly, and not only the exhaustion, but also the exposure to COVID, that they've allowed themselves to risk their lives. So hats off and kudos to so many people, and the rabbinate is no exception.
You have, from COVID, there's some fun stories that I've encountered of people, how they've been able to deal with things or how they've turned it into opportunity. You had any interesting, fun kind of stories during this pandemic?
I'd have to think. What I've tried to impress upon my congregants is that it is the role of the Jew, and this is my continuous message, to be a light unto the nations, as the prophet Isaiah says. And part of that, especially during a pandemic, is that when you see someone having a meltdown in public, our role is to be the person who steps in and tries to de-escalate the situation. People get into very heated places of anger and upset, even if two shopping carts crash in the supermarket by accident. And it's, if you ever see something like that, you have to go over and try to tell, say to the person and try to be the calming force and say, oh, I totally understand. Let me help you. What can I do to make things better for you? I don't know. Can you tell me, what have you found that's amusing about this pandemic?
Well, listen, I have, one of my fun things is, first of all, I have not had the opportunity to read on a Shabbos like I've had before, because since I don't have my regular shiurim that are taking place, all of a sudden I have some time on Shabbat, and I've discovered that it's nice sometimes to be a little bit of a balabas, of a layman on Shabbos. Actually, Shabbos has a whole different meaning. But my grandchildren come over every Shabbos, and my wife and I, we haven't had them in the house, but my wife and I have become, and it's not going to sound nice, I have to figure out the right way of saying it, but as we're throwing them popsicles or candy or lollipops, it's like, the menagerie in front of us, we're behind the gate on the front porch, and just watching that interaction of how things have evolved in this, or watching, as many people know, I drink a cup of coffee every morning after minyan. I go to Starbucks. And I still can't get over the fact that in the United States, Starbucks was considered an essential workplace.
Yeah, right.
And was open throughout the pandemic. And at one point, how long people would wait in line to get a cup of coffee in a drive-through on Starbucks, myself included, until finally they figured out how to make it work. All of these are to me, somewhat comical, interesting, fun things that have come out of it. Some of it enjoyable.
Why hasn't your school and your shul invested in a Keurig for you so that you don't need to spend money on Starbucks every day?
It is the experience of someone looking forward. You walk in, hi, Rabbi, here's your cup.
There you go. There you go. I'll tell you, look, since the pandemic started, I have viewed my role to be not only the very strict religious leader, but also the guy who you can let your hair down with. Every Motzei Shabbos, except for the 3 weeks since the pandemic, we've done a family Havdalah on Facebook Live, and we get hundreds upon hundreds of people watching. And then after I do the musical Havdalah with musical accompaniment, I do karaoke, and I put my own words to good oldies, the oldies that we grew up with.
Which, by the way, is a great segue. I heard you talk about with your father, the stories of your father being in the record industry.
Yeah.
And the people that he interfaced with, he was an attorney, and the roles he did. Going back, when you were growing up, you grew up in LA.
Yeah.
And you had all these interactions with some real fascinating people, and who normally you wouldn't think of a student of Ner Yisrael would have met.
That's true. That's true. It's been an interesting trajectory in my own personal career. At one point, I thought that I had to reject, my secular past of having grown up in the music industry in Hollywood. And then I came to a realization one day is that, no, if I want to be a good rabbi, I should embrace that part of my life and share it and show that you can be a frum, completely devoutly Orthodox Jew and at the same time be very much a part of the secular world and take the best elements of it. My dad and my mom are both Orthodox. They're both Shomer Shabbos, but my father happens to be in the music industry. I mean, he's mostly retired now. They should live and be well, my parents in LA. But they're both upstanding members of the Orthodox Jewish community. My dad was at one time the vice president of Beth Jacob in Beverly Hills. And he was a record producer in the executive council for ABC Records. And so a lot of platinum and gold records plastered in the back house of my parents' house that used to be in his office. And my dad represented a number of different artists. Once in a while, we would get tickets to go to concerts, and he would always bring home, those big LPs that are collector's items today.
So who was the most interesting person you'd never expect a rabbi to have met?
Well, I mean, my dad represented Johnny Cash in the 80s. And so he took me to a concert when Johnny and Rose Carter Cash June Carter Cash were playing in LA. And he took me backstage and had a chance to meet Johnny and his Rebbitzin. And that was a really interesting thing. And he was larger than life. My dad also used to book comedians for when NCSY on the West Coast would want to do a fundraiser. And the funniest thing for a teenage kid like myself was seeing the squirming, because my dad, this happened twice, one with Marty Allen.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. And the other one was with Jack Carter. If those of you who go back to when Rabbi Matanki and I go back, you remember those names. Those were two very famous comedians back in the 70s and 80s. And what I remember, maybe even earlier,
not necessarily the cleanest, though.
Well, that's the thing is that, the frum community, they would go to my dad and say, Len, can you book an entertainer for us? And my father would go through his Rolodex, find out who he could book. They wanted an entertainer or a comedian. So the first time my dad got Marty Allen, and he went backstage and he said, now, Marty, this is a religious audience. You've got to be squeaky clean, no off-color jokes, no innuendos. And Marty said, of course, I'm Jewish. I know what a religious Jew is all about. And invariably, somewhere past maybe 5 or 10 minutes into the act, he would totally forget himself. And this is what comedians do, is that when they see that they're losing their audience, they immediately go into the raunchy material because that's guaranteed to get a laugh. When it happened with Jack Carter, I remember I went backstage with my dad and he told Jack Carter the same thing. And for sure. And I'm there like a 13 or 14-year-old kid. Again, 5 to 10 minutes into the routine, he goes into the raunchy stuff. And then I turn around because it's all funny. I turn around and I see the rabbi slowly get up and start walking out. And I laughed more at that than I actually laughed at the jokes because I thought it was so funny. But those are some of the embarrassing situations from the past. But I learned a lot about that also. When I've booked comedians, I've made sure that they're much more familiar with the Orthodox community.
How many people are going to be in shul for Yom Tov? Do you know yet?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, there are a number of backyard minyanim which are going to continue for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We have created 4 venues. That's usually what we have over the Yom Tovim, but we're stacking those venues so that we have the potential for up to 8 venues. The real challenge that we have is that we only have one of those venues is an outdoor venue. And so even if we stack services for the outdoor venue, having an early service at 7 and a later service at 9:45, which is our plan, the problem is we're limited by the province of Ontario to not have more than 100 people in that venue. And so that really creates a serious problem, especially because at least half of our members are not comfortable coming indoors yet and still want to be outside.
Wow.
So it's really a problem. We're trying to get a variance, a permit, but we probably won't know until the last minute. And it's creating a lot of anxiety. And our office is trying to keep everyone at bay. We send out emails. Please do not bombard the office with constant requests. We're doing the best we can. And as soon as we have more information, we'll let you know. And as you've had the same experience, once you open up the outdoor venue, there's only a limited number of seats. And when, like within an hour, we sold out.
So we had the opposite. We opened up last night. The indoor venues, the 9:30, which is our second minion, or third. We have 7, 8:30, and 9:30. Some venues are just at 8:30. 9:30 sold out immediately within an hour, and the tent is only a third of the way occupied. And I think people are concerned in Chicago. You never know in Chicago if Rosh Hashanah is going to be warm, rainy, or snow.
Right.
I think they're thinking to themselves, I'm not going to take the risk on a tent.
Yeah.
But we're having that. And then how are you? And then the other question, which I've heard many rabbis talk about, I mentioned it before, is there seems to be two groups of people who are not coming back so quickly. The older, because they feel, there's risk, and the younger marrieds, whether it's because of childcare issues or just shul without the social piece to it is a challenge. Is the same thing happening with you?
Yes. Shul without, both of those issues are true. Legally, we were just told we could start having youth groups, but we're not ready to do it because we have our shul caters to families from many different schools. And so we came to the conclusion last night that we would be doing a disservice because the kids are going to be cross-pollinating and it's not going to be a healthy situation. We're just going to increase the potential for infection. But you're right, the socialization issue for a lot of young people is a huge issue. And that, it's a philosophical discussion that in addition to all of the political problems that we're facing in America today, the Jewish community, especially the modern Orthodox community, is facing its own crisis in the sense that our youth, our younger families, our younger couples don't seem to be as religiously connected as they are socially connected to Orthodoxy. And when when the primary connection to your heritage is social and not religious, it becomes quite disconcerting as to where this is going to lead us to. And I don't mean to paint a bleak picture. There are many, many very, very devoutly observant and committed Jews within our congregations, but that component is very troubling to me.
And I don't want to end on that note. So let's try something a little bit different because we are coming up to the last few minutes.
Sure.
What kinds of programs are you creating then during this time to re-engage people, to get people, to give them some kind of social outlet?
So, I take a position that you throw up as many things up on the ceiling and whatever sticks, sticks, and whatever falls down, falls down. We have a series called Really Interesting Stories of the People at the Bayit, where we showcase a different family or a different person every couple of weeks. We try to do interviews. We try to do events together, especially with our young families, with our assistant rabbi, who unfortunately just left to take a new position. We're trying so many different things, and we're going to continue trying all different kinds of social programs of interest, virtual tours of Israel, virtual this, virtual that. We're trying everything that we can, and I could always use some more ideas, Rabbi Matanki.
Well, I'm sure you have most of them yourself and within your community. One of the, obviously these Yom Noraim are going to be very interesting. One of the things we're looking at and we'll be creating is actually after davening in the afternoon, having our youth groups for the younger kids with a shofar blowing in the park to create some kind of opportunity for them to get together, which I'm looking forward to. But we've had comedians and all the rest of the things that everyone else has tried. You have some of the most fascinating balabatim because I've seen some of those programs. And I have great balabatim as well, but I have to figure out a way to do what you've been able to do. And on that note, Rabbi Korobkin, just given the time, first of all, I want to thank you for your time. But I need to tell everybody that Rabbi Korobkin really is the role model of what a great rabbi is all about. And he is a friend, and he's a colleague, and he's a guide to even those of us who may have been doing it for a while. So we look up to him, and I thank him for the time. I know what his time, how precious his time is. Rabbi, thank you for joining us. And
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you. The feeling is mutual, and I get more out of our friendship than I think you realize.
well, it's great having you on the show, and we'll figure out a time to schmooze soon, both of us together offline as well. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Shana Tova.
Bye-bye.